Okay. Hello, welcome to the second hearing for the Committee on Culture, Arts, and International Affairs. Today, February 10, the time 10:02 a.m. and we are meeting in room 329. Today we have with us Vice Chair Lopresti, Rep. Capella, and Rep. Tam. Mahalo for joining us today. And we also have Rep. Har online as well. She's on now. Okay, great. So before we get started, I'm gonna go over some brief housekeeping rules. First, there's a 2-minute time limit per testifier in order to allow as many people to testify as possible. Please keep yourself muted and your video off while waiting to testify and after your testimony is completed. The Zoom chat function will allow you to chat with the technical staff only. If you are disconnected unexpectedly, you may attempt to rejoin the meeting. If disconnected while presenting testimony, you may be allowed to continue if time permits. Please note the House is not responsible for any bad internet connections on the testifier's end. In the event of catastrophic network failure, it may be necessary to reschedule the hearing or schedule a meeting for decision-making. In that case, an appropriate notice will be posted. Lastly, please refrain from profanity or uncivil behavior. Such behavior may be grounds for removal from hearing without the ability to rejoin. So the housekeeping rules are out the way. We're gonna get to our agenda. So we do have a ASL interpreter on with us. So we will be reordering the agenda to accommodate for this ASL interpreter for a testifier. So with that being said, we're gonna take the agenda out of order and start with HB 840. So HB 840 relates to the American Sign Language and would recognize it as an official language. First testifier we have is Kirby Shaw. In support, we have William Hoji from the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission. In support, we have Debbie Jackson. In support, we have Roderick J. McDonald. In support, we also have Darlene Evwan in support, and Renee Trempe in support. Is anyone wishing to testify? Okay, seeing none. Questions, members? Seeing none. Okay. Thank you very much to the ASL interpreter for joining us today. We're going to move back to the first bill on the agenda, HB 755. First testifier we have is Jonathan Johnson from the State Foundation on Culture and Arts. He is here with us Zoom to testify. Hello.
Chair Gates and members of the committee, Zoom gallery, Bill Isla, great to see you. My name is Jonathan Johnson, Executive Director of State Foundation on Culture and the Arts. I'd like to provide comments on HB 755. I'll do, since it's a new committee, I'm going to do 3 things. Take a moment, cover a little background about State Foundation and 1%, the impact of HB 755, and then propose an idea. So the mission of the State Foundation is to promote, perpetuate, and preserve culture and arts for the people of Hawaii. We have a focus on education and access. And SFCA shares in the responsibility to perpetuate Hawaiian culture and arts. So in 1967, there was a 1% law passed where when the state builds a building, it takes away part of Hawaii's natural beauty. And we incorporate art by Hawaii's creatives back into the buildings to help make a difference and bring back man-made beauty. And you're familiar with that, right? You've got the Museum Without Walls on your office walls, right, in state buildings, but we do so much more. And in 1989, the Works of Art Special Fund was created. It's an account where funds are not tied to a specific building, but they're put there, and they allow for acquisition, distribution, conservation, and interpretation. So things like HISEM, parts of the Artists in the Schools program. So HB 755, the source of funding really matters on this one. So 1% funds are primarily GeoBond money. If beneficiaries' mortgages or other private or federal sources are paying for this 1%, that's understandable. It shouldn't qualify. But if the state sells bonds for construction, 1% makes sense, because we understand that every dollar going to Hawaiian Homes is important. In my experience, excluding 1% from state-funded construction won't gain visibly in the construction outcome. You'll have your roofs and your walls, but if we include Hawaiian creatives in Hawaiian home development, we'll make a lasting impression. So I'm proposing an idea. Rather than remove 1%, let's be proactive and have Hawaiian artists work in communities. And the SFCA welcomes the opportunity to work with DHHL. Together, working with Bill, we can incorporate Hawaiian artists into Hawaiian community development. That's what the direction we're looking at. So mahalo, and I'll take questions after.
Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have William Ila from DHHL. He's here with us to testify on aloha.
Okay, aloha, Chair Gates, Vice Chair Lupresi. I enjoyed the testimony that was just given by Jonathan. However, we stand on our support of this bill. Right now, we're at a crisis stage trying to get 28,000 people off of the wait list. And unfortunately, that is the focus right now of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, and this bill would help us achieve that. And other bills that are going through the legislature, if it could increase the revenue for the department, then perhaps we could take a look at our rehabilitation process to help with Native Hawaiian artists. So thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. We're gonna move on to our following testifiers on this piece of legislation. We have Catherine Don in support, and Sean Brown in opposition. Any questions, members? Rep Ward?
Jonathan, where is it? Johnson, the Culture and Arts. And then Mr. Ila, if I may. Jonathan, are you there?
I am here.
Question. What's more important, Hawaiian artists or Hawaiian homesteaders who are 28,000 waiting on a wait list for a house?
I think having a roof over your head is super important, and building community around that place really matters. I would say it's not either or. I think we can do both. I think we can.
It's a good question to lateral to Mr. Ila. Mr. Ila, how much will this money save for housing if it passes? I mean, not save, but actually cause not to be taken away.
It's likely in the thousands, perhaps approaching the 100,000, and that's one more lot that can take care of one more beneficiary off the wait list. And
So
if
that
we
could be one more house.
if we chip away at the amount of money that we spend for infrastructure and those things, then it all adds up to something significant.
So for some of us who follow this for the last 100 years, or not 100 years, but followed what has taken place for 100 years, seeing that there's 28,000 waiting, obviously, even when there's a recession or a depression, people stop buying jewelry, they stop buying art. And when you have a housing shortage, you obviously would do the same and similar thing. Last question, Mr. Ila. If we were to do what we're supposed to do as a legislature, how much money do you need every year to get that wait list down, given your burn rate and capability to build houses?
The sufficient sums asked that the commission presents to both the governor and the legislature varies between about $140 to $200 million per year, which we feel, and the commission feels, would be an adequate amount of money each year to achieve getting the 28,000 people off the wait list instead of 180 years, perhaps in 30 years.
And how much did you get last year? What was their,
We got, governor's budget was for 25 million last year in CIP funds.
well, that's just to keep the lights on and pay your employees, isn't it? That's this,
No, that's for capital improvement funds. We got 18.6, I believe, last year for the administrative and operating costs.
didn't Castanetti, the judge, say that it should be 28.6 or something like that to keep you guys in?
Her ruling was that it should be about that amount after an evidentiary hearing. However, the state Supreme Court decided otherwise.
So I hope all the artists of Hawaii don't think we're anti-art or anti-intellectual, but we're pro-housing and pro-Hawaiians to have at least housing after 100 years of waiting for it. Thank you, Mr. Isla, for all you do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to the testifiers. We appreciate you guys being here today. If there is no further questions, we're going to move on to
I
our
have
next
a
agenda item.
question.
Rep. Lopresti, Vice
Thank
Chair,
you, Chair.
go ahead.
Mr. Johnson, what if, just idea just came to me, what if there was a sunset date or something, or a benchmark that would both achieve the intent of the bill and the discussion thus far, and recognizing the fiscal reality and the moral obligations to provide homes, to then come back to a later date to maybe reinstitute that? Is that something that you had thought about?
You know, looking at the crisis for the Native Hawaiians and how long it's taken, I don't think that would, I think it really makes a difference. And I wouldn't encourage that, you know, just understanding the situation. I don't think that would matter, right? Because, you know, what, they've been waiting 100 years, right? It's like, no.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, again, mahalo to the testifiers. We will be moving on to HB 1357 relating to the Hawaiian language. This would require certain government entities to display a Hawaiian translation of their office name or department on letterhead and on their official website. So first testifier we have is the Hawaii Civil Rights Commission. In support, we have Cheryl B. In support, Daniel Lee. In support, and Rikako Ishiki in support. Do we have any questions, members? Okay, seeing none, we will be moving on to HB 1358. This is relating to historic preservation and provides necessary clarification in definitions and in required tasks for the historic preservation program. This also increases fines for violations. We have Alan Downer, DLNR, offering comments.
Good morning, Mr. Chair,
Morning.
Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Alan Downer. I'm the administrator of the State Historic Preservation Division, and the department stands on its written testimony, providing comments. Be happy to answer any questions if the committee has any.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. We are going to move on to our next testifier, Cheryl B. in support, and Daniel Lee in support. Do we have any questions, members? Rep. Ward?
Question. What would Chair Gates' office look like if this bill passed? What would it say? How would we implement this in terms of putting that up in House of Representatives in Hawaiian or whatnot? In other words, what's the practical applications? Does anyone know when this thing becomes operational?
So we know that OHA has been helping with translations, as well as departments have in the past. created translations for letterheads and so forth. And so what we're asking is to basically, if there has been already translations for letterheads and titles and on their website, that they remain there, and that if there isn't, then we shall develop these translations to be used within our state government.
So would it say Representative Gates, House of Representatives in English, and then it would say in Hawaii? In
Correct.
Hawaiian?
Correct.
Is that what you said?
Correct. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you for the question. Okay, but we were yeah. Okay, give me 1 second.
Chair, can I ask another question?
Hold on 1 second. So the bill you was asking about was the last bill we talked about, which was 1357. We were on 1358 regarding the historic preservation. So 2 separate bills.
Follow mine.
No problem. Okay, did you still have a question, Report?
What cost of that would be? Any estimation?
We
We're in a pandemic, we got huge focus in our budget.
we don't have a cost estimate as of right now, do we?
This is for finance.
No, but we will follow up on that.
Thank you.
Thank
It
you.
does. It has a fantastic. It has.
Okay, so going back to HB 1358, does anyone have any questions regarding HB 1358?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's Rep. Har.
Hey, Rep. Har,
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question, please?
please do.
Mr. Downer. Dipti.
Yes.
Oh, good morning, Mr. Downer. Thank you for being here. I'm looking at your written testimony, and it seems to be that there are some provisions that SHPD seems to be in support of, but other provisions in which you folks don't, you either think the penalties are too high. So can we just actually go through your written testimony? Because I think that it's important, it's incumbent upon this committee to understand the challenges that SHPD faces. You know, having been in office for 15 years now, it's no secret SHPD has always dealt with a staffing problem. And given the far reach that SHPD has, with basically almost any project that's over 50 years old on an architectural front, whether it's archaeology, it puts a major strain on your staff. So can we just go through your written testimony so that we're clear specifically on what provisions the department actually supports and what the department does not support?
Sure. How would you like me to do that? Would you like me to go through our comments sort of section by section?
Sure. If that's okay with the chair?
Yeah, if we can not take too long though. Go ahead.
So I'm sorry, I didn't. Do you want me to go through section by section then? Is that?
No, section 1 is unnecessary. You just talk about, you know, inserting a definition of pre-contact historic property. And then you go into section 2, which proposes to amend section 63(7). And basically you say the department believes there is no substantive difference between technical assistance and consultation. So in other words, are you saying section 2 is unnecessary?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a minor, almost an editorial change, and I don't, you know, my personal feeling is we consult with counties all the time and agencies all the time. We're already doing that. So I don't think if it is amended that way, I don't think it makes any substantive difference.
Okay, and then section 3, this is a substantive change regarding the Hawaii Historic Places Review Board. I mean, this bill essentially proposes to change the makeup. So you're saying here that the department does not, in fact, it does oppose this provision, correct?
Yeah, we don't support that provision because, you know, at this point, the administration is asking the legislature to reduce the number of members on the board. Right now, the board has 10 members. The governor is asking to reduce that to 7. And, we think it's problematic to have two members from any particular specialization. So there are, right now, as the statute reads, there needs to be an architect, there needs to be a historian, there needs to be an archaeologist, and a member who is a specialist in Hawaiian culture and tradition. And that would be 4 of the 7 members. And we think that specifying additional specialists or additional members from a particular specialization just doesn't serve a purpose.
Mr. Downer, correct me if I'm wrong, though. Hasn't it always been an issue in the state of Hawaii where we're trying to find specialists? I remember for years, way back, we were trying to find an archaeologist. We couldn't find anyone in the state of Hawaii this is before your time, but for years, we were trying to find a qualified archaeologist to serve on behalf of SHIFTI, on behalf of the state. So are you saying that, I'm just trying to understand your testimony. Are you just saying the number of specialties is already covered in the current makeup of the board? Or are you saying in addition to the current makeup, it's very difficult to find these areas of specialty in the state of Hawaii, these specialists?
Yeah, I think recruitment for this board has been problematic. There's no question about that. Right now, at the end of this session, we will have 4 vacancies in the 10-member board. So, we have been able to maintain 1 of each of the specialties, but finding consistent, except for architects, it's very difficult to find a second person, not because they aren't there, but because getting them to actually be willing to take their time to serve seems to be very difficult.
Okay, thank you. And then section 4 talks about the penalty, increasing the maximum penalty for a violation from 10 to 20,000 for each individual violation. And it seems that the department is appreciative of the intent, but does not agree with it.
Yeah, so, right now, I can give you sort of without going into all of the details, we currently are preparing a submission to the board where we are asking the board to assess a penalty of $480,000. And that's based on the $10,000 limit. If we were to ask, and I should say that the board has made it very clear that their view is that we should be assessing the maximum penalty. So if this were to go to $20,000, that would double it and make it almost $1 million penalty, which would be, for all the, however we divide up the penalty, that would be ruinous for the people who have done this.
Okay, and I apologize, Chair. I think, again, SHIFTI is such an important state department that I don't think gets enough attention. So I appreciate the chair's latitude because I think this is so important, understanding SHIFTI's positions and the challenges that they've had with respect to staffing and the board, et cetera. So finally, regarding section 4, the bill proposes to amend section 6011.5 by inserting that any landowner or developer responsible for any project where violations are found to have occurred shall execute any mitigation and preservation measures ordered by the department and shall be jointly and severally liable for any costs of mitigation and preservation. So you support that particular provision?
Yes, and it actually reflects current practice, so that somebody found to have violated the law, somebody who was assessed a penalty by the board would be required to undertake the mitigation necessary to correct it. And so, yeah, I think it is current practice, but in any case, we would support that.
Okay, but so you're saying that currently that's not occurring right now, that landowners or developers are not being held jointly and severally liable for the cost of mitigation?
No, I'm saying that is current policy. That's what we require.
Okay, so that's currently in practice now.
That's current practice, yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Downer. Thank you for all of your hard work on behalf of SHIFTI. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And
Questions, man?
I would note that, this is also, of course, a work in progress, and we have been having conversations with SHIFTI offline regarding legislation moving through, and including increasing staffing, which has been probably their number one challenge at the division. So with that, we will be moving on to our final bill, HB 1164. We have Bishop Museum here to testify. Please go ahead.
Aloha, Chair Gates, Vice Chair Lopresti, members of the committee, Ka'ivi Yun, Vice President of Operations, Planning and Program Management for Bishop Museum. We stand in our written testimony, and I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Mahalo. With that being said, that is our only testifier on this legislation. Do we have any questions, members? Go ahead, Rep. Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Bishop Museum, thank you for being the keeper of the culture. In the testimony says you got 25 million catalog objects. Amazing. You may have more than Amazon. 25 million. The point is, but you need a price tag. It's blank in terms of the appropriation. If you were doing a mini max, what number would you fill in for this bill? We can get our heads around.
Thank you for the question, Rep. Ward. I did say at last hearing that we are seeking 4.7 million to base subsidy, simply because back in 1992, that was at 2.5 million. Unfortunately, just after that, our subsidy got cut to 600,000. So we've been operating lean and mean all this time. And you commented about the 25 million objects in our collection. That is true, and we also have 100+ years of research, scientific research across the Pacific. Our staff is responsible. They hold this kuleana very heavily because once these collections or this research is gone, it's irreplaceable and incalculable. So, you know, unlike most organizations, things like air conditioning, you know, we have our bill is just south of $1 million a year in air conditioning. And you can imagine our air conditioning has to stay on 24/7, 365, lest that 25 million objects disappear. So, you know, we realize the COVID economy that we're in, but this addition to our base would at least get us to level, to bubble. You know, we're not going to be high on the hog or anything. It's just our staff has been, like I said in my opening comments, lean and mean for over a decade, trying to take care of Hawaii's most precious treasures.
Keeping the culture is not cheap. You've got to have, what is the total budget that you actually need to operate on? And what is the gauge that we charge people versus other grants and other things that make up your budget?
Yeah, so, you know, state subsidy currently is less than 4% of our total budget. Gates is probably at like 20%. Then we have private donations and grants that make up the rest. We have an operating budget around $16 million. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
6 or 60?
16. And that was pre-COVID time. So, you know, I'm going to guess we're at, 14 around there. Our gates have fallen, our admissions have fallen 80% because of COVID. Thankfully, well, there's two things that happened. There was Act 42 was a special appropriation that raised our base to 1.5 million. But as you know, that's done as of this year. It was a 2-year appropriation. So we are now back to 600,000. And again, Budget and Finance had made a recommendation to cut even that to 400,000, which would be 33% a cut to our state subsidy in our base. And, Rep. Ward, that would be a lethal blow to the museum. I mean, I just don't see how we can sustain that. But the second issue, the second positive thing is we applied for PPP. We luckily and fortunately did not have to furlough or do any layoffs. And we can't afford to do that. Like I said, we have a skeletal crew, but they need to be there to preserve and protect those collections.
Clearly, you are too important to fail, but at the same time, the money that is going to be around for grants and aids and the nonprofits is going to be really scarce. So
Yep.
this bill is a good placeholder for whatever is available. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Kaivi, for joining us today to provide testimony. If there is no further questions, seeing none, we will adjourn for decision making at 11:30. Adjourn. Okay. Okay, members, we're reconvening on the Committee on Culture and Arts and International Affairs for our 10 a.m. Agenda, as well as last week's agenda. We will be on February 3rd. We will be having decision making on those measures as well. So we will start off with HB 755. Chair's recommendation is to pass out as a HD1. We will be defecting the date to July 1st, 2065. Do we have any questions, members? Any concerns?
Which one again? Sorry.
HB 755.
Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go reservations on this one, Chair. The main thing for me is I just would like to see maybe a sunset date on it, and I'm just such a strong supporter of the special fund for the arts that I have to go WR. Sorry.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Point taken, and thank you. So with that, we're gonna move on to any other questions, concerns? Seeing none. Vice Chair for the vote.
HD1.
HD1.
Voting on House Bill 755. Chair votes aye. Rep. Har.
Aye.
Rep. Capella.
Aye.
Rep. Nishimoto. Rep. Tam votes aye. Rep. Yamane.
Aye.
Rep. Ward is excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. We're gonna move on to HB 840. Chair's recommendation is to pass out as a HD1. We will be defecting the date to July 1st, 2065, as well as making some technical amendments. Do we have any questions or concerns from the members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 840. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Knowing the excused absence of Rep. Ward, any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. We're gonna move on to HB 1357. Chair's recommendation is to pass out as a HD1. We will be defecting the date to July 1st, 2065. We will also be adding in section 2, clarifying language regarding the usage of kahakos and okinas. And finally, we will be making some technical amendments. Any questions, concerns, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 1357. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absence of Rep. Ward. Any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. We're gonna move on to HB 1358. Chair's recommendation is to pass as a HD1. We will be defecting the date to July 1st, 2065. We will be amending section 2, removing language regarding consultation. In section 3, we will be deleting section 3 from this HD1. And also in section 4, we will be changing language regarding OHA from shall to may consult with OHA. And then finally, we'll be making some technical amendments. Any questions, concerns, members?
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, do we have a? Go ahead, Rep. Har.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get started, I first wanted to correct, I had incorrectly addressed the chair of SHPD. I called him Mr. Downer. He's actually Dr. Downer. So I wanted to apologize to Dr. Downer. My apologies, Dr. Downer. I incorrectly stated your title. Secondly, thank you so much for the recommendation, Chair. First of all, I know this is the chair's measure, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness gone into the measure itself. At this time, I just haven't, I understand the changes that the chair is recommending, but given all of the problems that SHPD has had, I don't want to make it any more difficult for them. Again, staffing has been an issue, having vacancies on the board has been an issue, and without being able to actually see the actual changes that the chair is recommending, respectfully, I'll be going with reservations, but I do support the intent of the chair. So thank you very much for introducing this important measure, Chair.
Thank you, Rep. Harn. Just to add on to that, we understand the need for funding and staffing at SHPD, and our hopes is that with the increase of fines, that this will help fund SHPD's budget to help staff their division. So thank you for your comments. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, any other comments, concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote. I guess so. Did we lose Rep. Lepresti? Uh-oh. We're quorum. If
He just has to go back on this one.
should we give him a second?
Do we have quorum without him?
No, we have quorum.
We have quorum though. Let's give him a minute. 1 minute. We'll give him a break. 11:39. We'll start the voting.
I just talked to him. I texted him.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The only thing you cannot do is recess during this.
Yeah.
So you can do filibuster.
A long
if you want
pause.
to. You You should take the time, since you have, to comment Rep. Shimoto on the great tire he
I
has.
know. Exactly. No, we're still live.
I just want the audience to know how well dressed you are.
No, I love the blue suit. Blue's such a nice.
And the orange tie.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the shoes.
Well, let me guess, Aldo.
I
think I have the same one when black.
Uh-oh. Shoe buddies.
Shoe buddies.
Okay.
Okay, we have gave Vice Chair a minute to join back in. Seeing that he's not here, we will continue given that we have quorum. So we were on HB 1358. Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on HB 1358, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absence of Rep. Lepresti and Rep. Ward, and reservations from Rep. Har. Any other reservations? Any no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. We will be moving on to HB 1164. Chair's recommendation is to pass out as a HD1. We will be defecting the date, and in the committee report, I would want to also include an amount for finance to consider. Any questions, concerns, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Vote 1164, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absence of Rep. Lepresti and Rep. Ward. Any reservations? Any no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna move on to decision-making for our February 3rd agenda. HB 623 is our first bill. Chair's recommendation is to pass out as a HD1, defecting the date to July 1st, 2065, as well as changing the fiscal years to include this year for funding. So it'd be from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 2022. Other than that, any questions or concerns? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 623, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the excused absence of Rep. Lepresti and Rep. Ward. Any reservations? Any no's? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, Please note the presence of Rep. Ward. Okay, we're gonna move on to HB 625. The chair's recommendation is to pass as a HD1. We will be defecting the date to July 1st, 2065. We also have some tech amendments, and I will be noting OIP's comments into our committee report. Any questions, concerns, members? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 625, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting the excused absence of Rep. LaPresti and the new presence of Rep. Ward. Any reservations? Any noes? Chair recommendation is adopted.
Okay, members, final bill HB 678. Chair's recommendation is to pass as a HD1. We will be defecting the date to July 1st, 2065. We will also be restoring Election Day as the official state holiday, as well as technical amendments. Any questions, concerns, members?
Sure. So we get, this is a twofer, right? So we got a holiday for Election Day, and then we got the Hawaiian Independence Day.
Correct.
Good decision. Thank you.
All right. Vice Chair for the vote.
Voting on House Bill 678, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting the excused absence of Rep. LaPresti. Any reservations? Any noes? Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. That will conclude adjourn our meeting.